The United States of America called it a reset, a 10% tariff on almost everything crossing America's border, with more to follow. Take a listen.
You are going to always have a baseline. I mean, there could be an exception at some point. We'll see. Somebody does something exceptional for us. That's always possible. But basically, you have a baseline of a minimum of 10%, and some of them will be much higher, 40%, 50%, 60%, as they've been doing to us over the years. We had a wonderful deal yesterday. We have 4 or 5 other deals coming immediately. We have many deals coming down the line, and ultimately, we're just signing the rest of them in. But we always have a baseline of 10%.
2 dates. 2 levers. Markets blinked. Phones lit up in Tokyo, Seoul, and Riyadh. On paper, it looked simple. Pay to play, or lose the gate. But behind the podium and the headlines, something else began to move. Quietly. Contracts were redrafted, clocks were changed, and the numbers you saw on TV weren't the only numbers that mattered. Today, we're going to follow the paper trail, fact sheets, orders, and term sheets, and map what really happened next. No drama, just receipts. By the end, you'll see why the world didn't just react. It reframed the game. Keep an eye on the dates. The details decide the power. The White House declared a new economic war, a 10% tax on the world. The goal was obedience. The result was a masterclass in slaying a master. Here is how it unfolded. On April 2, 2025, President Trump invoked IEEPA to impose a 10% tariff on nearly all imports, framing it as a response to persistent trade deficits and foreign economic practices deemed a national emergency. IEEPA is the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, a U.S. law that allows the president to regulate commerce in response to a declared national emergency. 2 clocks were set. The 10% floor would start April 5th, and higher reciprocal country rates would begin April 9th. In plain English, it was a universal toll on global goods, plus steeper charges for dozens of countries. Within days, the U.S. Customs began collecting the 10%, and the bigger country-specific rates were queued. Major outlets framed it as a sweeping shift touching trillions in annual imports. The markets wobbled. Executives scrambled. Then came the fine print. On April 9th, a presidential action adjusted the reciprocal tariff table. On July 31st, another order modified the matrix, but kept the 10% floor. Asked if that baseline was temporary, senior economic officials said the 10% would remain unless an extraordinary deal changed it. That wasn't soothing, it was signaling. Pay to play, or lose access to the American market. For a moment, the U.S. returned to its old playbook. Washington struck one-on-one deals, promising to ease tariffs if trading partners pledged enormous upfront investments. Hundreds of billions poured into American industries. But soon, other nations hit back with their own countermeasures. Japan said yes, then rewrote the contract. Washington celebrated tariff reductions and a U.S. investment framework worth about $550 billion. But Tokyo secured the key condition. All funds would move through its state bank on its timeline with its veto power. This wasn't a tribute. It was shared governance. The signal was clear. Align with the U.S. on defense, but keep control of the nation's economic future. South Korea introduced resistance by design. When a $350 billion lump sum payment was proposed, Seoul openly said it couldn't deliver upfront. The final arrangement limited direct cash to about $200 billion, spread over roughly $20 billion per year, with another $150 billion earmarked for U.S. shipbuilding. This wasn't defiance, it was strategy. By setting timelines, caps, and categories, South Korea transformed what looked like a demand into a structured plan. Saudi Arabia made the biggest splash in headlines, then shaped the details to its advantage. The White House announced that the investment package had expanded to almost $1 trillion, covering civil nuclear cooperation, critical minerals, artificial intelligence, and defense. including future deliveries of F-35 fighter jets and hundreds of U.S. tanks. But the fine print told a different story. Nuclear cooperation would exclude enrichment, mineral projects required U.S. approvals, AI ventures remained under export controls, and actual capital spending would be phased in over long timelines. Riyadh accepted the headline number that grabs attention, while securing influence over the technology, schedules, and suppliers that matter most. The official line called it a tariff war. In reality, it exposed something deeper. This wasn't about trade deals at all. It was a test of national sovereignty. And the strategy of coercion, or the bully method, failed. The old approach was straightforward. Issue an ultimatum, demand tribute, and expect compliance. The new reality is shaped by sovereign strategists. Japan redesigned its deal to ensure it held the keys. South Korea turned a simple yes or no into a carefully managed flow. Saudi Arabia accepted the headline photo op, but secured control over the levers that matter. In the short term, tariffs handed Washington a powerful bargaining tool. In the long run, though, they taught allies how to turn sovereignty into value, building projects at home, shaping technology transfer routes, structuring joint ventures with governance rights, inserting veto powers, and slowing the pace of capital. On paper, the scoreboard shows tariff reductions and trillion-dollar pledges. In practice, the real contest is over who controls what gets built, where it happens, and when it unfolds. The shift shows up in both paperwork and courtrooms. Lawsuits argue that IEEPA was never intended to create a standing tariff system, while appellate rulings now spell out the reciprocal tariffs framework in plain terms. The Supreme Court's decision, whether to uphold or limit it, will decide how firm the 10% tariff floor really is. Overseas, negotiators have treated that floor as a reference price. And in some sectors, a stable baseline is preferable to unpredictable swings of 25 to 50%. That's not submission, it's risk management, paired with bargaining for domestic gains. So, here's the Master Slayer playbook. 3 lessons now resonating from Tokyo to Riyadh. First, reject the imposed frame. Don't accept the ultimatum. Reshape the negotiation on your own terms. Second, turn friction into leverage. Use law and procedure to chip away at raw power. Third, swap headlines for control. Give them the big number for the press release, but keep the decision-making authority in your hands. The bully's arithmetic is breaking down. The old threat model said, apply pressure until the weaker side gives in. The emerging post-obedience model says, cooperate on defense, but share control over economics. One approach runs on fear, the other operates through export controls, dispute panels, training programs, software partitions, annual limits, and local content rules. Ultimatums fade into memoranda, and press conferences are replaced by months of governance talks, where sheer size no longer guarantees command. What comes next is worth watching closely. 1. Conversion. How much of the almost 1 trillion actually turns into appropriations, construction starts, and signed financing between 2026 and 2028? 2. Compute and minerals choke points. Which export control exceptions survive, who takes seats on joint venture boards, and who directs the revenue streams. 3. Portfolio tilt. If public equity remains modest while private and JV stakes surge, that's the signal. Power shifting from headline totals to boardroom votes. 4. Fighter threshold. How many F-35s make it through Congress, what software partitions they carry, and how training schedules are shaped under Israel's qualitative edge rules. By the way, if you are not aware, Israel's qualitative military edge, QME rules are a U.S. legal and policy commitment to ensure Israel maintains superior military capabilities compared to any potential adversary in the Middle East. Let's call it what it is. The old master-slave mindset tried to reappear through tariffs and threats. It collided with a world that responds with calculation, not submission. Washington walked away with headline figures. Tokyo, Seoul, and Riyadh secured the levers inside the system. The era of edicts has ended. The era of negotiated alignment has begun. If you want the playbook behind the headlines, subscribe. This is Trad Economics, and perspective has never mattered more.